Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Empowering Musicians Podcast. I am your host, Michael Manley, and I've been doing a series of highlights of really currently working musicians, especially freelance musicians, to really dig into how they're building their careers and how they're succeeding. And I'm very happy to welcome this week Bill Leary, who is my first in-person guest.
Woo! Hey!
So the first time I've ever had somebody on the same camera with me. So it's very exciting. We're not in our own Zoom boxes. And Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your career has been like?
Okay, I'm a saxophonist, woodwind player, doubler, and after college started touring with Ringling Brothers CIrcus, which kind of led to almost everything I've done.
Yeah.
Indirectly or directly, and toured with Ringling Brothers for about 5 years, on and off, and a few Broadway shows in the mix. Went to Singapore for a show, and then ended up in Vegas and been here the last 8 years.
Great.
And just wrapped up my third show out here. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, when you mentioned doubling, what does that actually mean, like to somebody who doesn't maybe know that term?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I ended up transferring to New Jersey City University, all of my professors there were on Broadway playing shows, Fosse to Thoroughly Modern Millie, and I had no idea really. I just know I play a little flute, play a little clarinet, and they explained to me, no, if you can really up your game in those areas as a doubler, it'll open up this whole world of shows, and I had no clue about that till I went to New Jersey to study with those guys.
Yeah, and doubling is really more like tripling or quadrupling.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a term that we use in the industry because when you're working on Broadway or in a show and you're playing two instruments, you're getting what's called a double, which is a pay bump.
Yeah.
So and if you're playing three of those instruments, you're getting two doubles, which is an oxymoronic sounding phrase.
Right.
But that's how we do it. So tell me a little bit about. Were you starting out as a clarinet player or were you a sax player?
Sax player. I mean, I played clarinet in 5th grade and hated it. And I was like, I want to play sax.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started out as sax and then picked up a flute in high school. And then, and then when I went to Indiana University and eventually transferred to New Jersey City University. And that's where I picked up clarinet and then started really, really getting into the doubling heavy because it just... I didn't realize all these doors would help open if I could do that.
Yeah, there are certain people that have success as straight ahead sax players, but it's not as common, right?
Right.
If you play sax, flute, clarinet, bass clarinet.
And it was fun. I enjoyed playing all the instruments and getting called to do crazy gigs and yeah.
And tell me a little bit about the CIrcus. And how that started for you.
I mean, I got called from a recommendation from somebody when I was at Indiana, and I had no clue. I was working on my master's at the time in New Jersey, and they flew me down to Nashville, and I remember saying, "So, what hotel are we staying in?" They're like, "Hotel." So they literally dropped me at the train, gave me the music and a CD player at the time and said, "All right, good luck. See you tomorrow." And then that was it. The book was like this big.
Yeah.
And just trying to go through it, sift through it all in one night. And it went well. And so it led to many years of working with them. And I had a blast. Yeah.
Yeah. And how long were you with the CIrcus?
On and off 5 years. I did a 2-year run to start. And then I was kind of always called to fill in. Usually if somebody got fired. So can you come down to Florida tomorrow? I'm like, okay. And then, I just made lifelong friends out there and just had a great experience. So, yeah.
Yeah. When I was the director of touring and theater, I had worked with you and your colleagues on your contract negotiations and the Ringling circuses were unionized, which was great.
Yeah.
And it was in a way like a really interesting workplace because it was largely unchanged for about 180 years. It was like I was sad when it closed, but I was also like amazed that it lasted as long as it did. And when you say the train, like everybody lived on the train.
Yeah.
Like that's how people were getting around. And I remember taking a tour. I have such great circus stories, but I remember taking a tour with Don Parker at the time, and looking at this, like, I don't know, maybe 7x9 space.
Yeah, I remember when you came. I do remember you visiting the train, I think in Long Island or somewhere.
Yeah.
And because in our contract, it said the band members were given a stateroom, but it never said, and Don was really great at trying to get that wording in there, what constituted a stateroom.
Yeah.
And you came and checked it out. So that way they couldn't put us in a tiny little clown room, because actually the clowns had small rooms.
Well, that was my favorite quote of Don's was, I was looking at this, this where the musicians were living, and it was just like, it was like literally like 7 feet by 9 feet or something.
Right.
And I was like, wow, how do you guys really live in this tiny space? And he said, oh, you should see where the clowns live.
That was, even way smaller.
And
like
I
a
was
closet.
like, oh, the clowns. No. Yeah. So I never did see where, well, I don't even know if I saw what the clowns lived, but it was basically like a phone booth, right?
Oh, yeah. It even had like a little slat door like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And our rooms were big compared to most out there.
Yeah.
And no, I remember seeing you guys walk around the train there. That was like in 2004 or something, or 5. I forget. It was a while ago.
Yeah. So, it was a while ago. And for those of you watching, I do have some of my circus swag here. We've got our ringling clown and our ringling elephant. And it was such it was a very sad year when they announced they were closing. And, it was, they never did successfully really message about the elephants and all the other animal acts that was the kind of lightning rod that got them into some, political hot water. But at the same time, I just remember thinking, this is like the only way that certain people are going to see elephants or see tigers, because they don't live near zoos.
Right.
And so there's a huge like education and animal appreciation value that's lost because we no longer have the circus. So, but that was a great experience. And from there, is that when you moved to Las Vegas?
Kind of. I did a tour of Annie in 2008 and 2009, and then I ended up going to Singapore, but that with kind of a Cirque du Soleil copy show, and that was directed by Phil McKinley, who had directed many Ringling shows and their Gold Unit a lot, their One Ring show.
Yeah.
And then after that, my stint over there, I went back to Ringling for a little bit, and then came to Vegas from a Ringling connection. My friend Peter Buffano kind of recommended me for this gig and Vegas Nocturne. And when that gig was going on, Phil McKinley came to the show, told me about Showstoppers. So it's like that one show kind of, leapfrogged into all these other things. So
that's, I think, often how it works. You get on a gig, and then you meet people and you make some connections. Yeah. And we had John Miller on about 2 weeks ago. Yeah. A big contractor in New York, and he basically said, you get on the radar by showing up.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And putting it out there. And he had an interesting story about hiring somebody who was really young, who he didn't know, but and needed a sub at the last minute. But he had played with so many people, and he had been endorsed by so many people that he was like, I'm going to give this kid a chance. And
right.
He ended up being one of his top players for years.
That's great. Yeah.
So it is really about your network and about showing up, and I think playing well, and also being somebody who isn't crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing on Ringling, because I played a gig last night with Father John Misty, and they're on the road. Mm-hmm. And I was just an add-on here in Vegas, and they're like, oh yeah, we're on the road. They're on the road for 3 weeks, and then they have a break, and then they're on the road we were on the road 50 weeks. Yeah. So I'm like, you guys don't know what on the road really means. And so, because it was funny how they were saying, after about 20 days, we start to get on each other's nerves. I'm like, after about 20 weeks. Yeah. So it was being able to like coexist with each other in such, we were playing a lot on that show. And so, just being able to get along and all that, being easy to work with, which, you're tested out there. So,
I was really amazed at the with the circus, especially, it just, as you said, the books are really thick.
Yeah.
It's it's like wall to wall playing, and it's just extremely demanding work.
Yeah.
And then I just remember watching the band leaders, who are always trumpet players, who would be playing with one hand, blowing their brains out and conducting. You know, it was just crazy. It's a real lost art, and it's a shame. But and there's so much great music that was written for the circus too. When I think about it. All those marches, the K.L. King marches.
Well, and then when I was there, it kind of transferred into film score composers. Michael Picton and Craig Safin were two guys who had been working in Hollywood, and they still would, you know, sprinkle in some of those traditional things, but it was kind of just a through score, you know, it just didn't stop.
Yeah.
So,
and it really is important when you're on a tour, especially like you all were on a train.
Yeah.
When I did early touring, it was with an opera company, which was doing one-nighters.
Whew, yeah.
So, you know, and the great news is you got to play great music at the end of the night.
Yes.
But you're on a bus all day. And we used to joke that, like, instead of having auditions, we would just put people on a bus for 5 hours. Like, that would be the test.
That's true. That's really funny.
Because if you can't get along in those kind of close, like submarine type situations, and pits are like that as well.
Yes.
When you're in, whether it's a stage or a pit, and you're playing with the same, you know, 15 or 20 people all the time.
Yeah.
And you really have to learn how to get along with your colleagues.
It's key. Yeah.
So you just most recently finished up a show called Opium.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. And how did that? It was
a blast.
How was that for you? That's almost like a circus in a way.
Yeah, it's a variety show, comedy, circus acts, and it started with a 5-piece band and a singer. And at that time, I was the assistant music director, so I got a chance to conduct while playing sax, and that was invaluable. Dave Ostrom was the band leader, and working with him and being able to, you know, play and try to conduct and cue and do all that was something as a sax player we rarely ever get a chance to do, and it was great. And I got that under my belt to at least say I could kind of do that now. Yeah. And then unfortunately, as shows goes, we know they made cuts, and then I became the one-man band, singing, rapping, kind of having lines on the show. And playing a bunch of instruments, keyboards, and then my tenure just ended. So or my run, and they did big changes. It's still going on, but without any live musicians, and it's totally different now. So
and it's a shame because it is a variety show, and you kind of really miss that live music. And things are very. Especially here in Las Vegas, it's very, it's like a roller coaster, right? Like, some years you might be employed for 4 or 5 years on one gig, and then it just might all dry up, and there might be an explosion of work in the next year.
I mean, hoping things turn around here soon, but I was one of the lucky few, knock on wood, to have that job. So, now I'm just back out there and see what happens next, I guess. So
Do you do any teaching?
I was doing a ton of private teaching, but the job there was a lot of times I'd have to go in early, so I kind of scaled back. So I'm gonna probably amp that up a little bit now. So
And do you teach all the woodwinds, or
I do?
Oh,
I mean, I'll do flute and clarinet, a little bit of oboe, but for that I used to always tell everybody to go to Caitlin Kramer, but she's not in town anymore. So and she was my teacher. She helped me a ton. So there are some new people, but maybe you know them better than me in the oboe world. But especially beginner. If they get really, really high level at flute clarinet, I would pass them off to, like, you know, somebody at UNLV or one of the specialists in just that. But a lot of my sax students, I would be like, you know, time to get a flute, time to get a clarinet if you want to do that. Even the best players. And I was at LVA for 4 or 5 years as a parapro and taught a lot of kids from there, and that was a blast. So maybe do a little more of that again.
Yeah, and that's our arts high school, Las Vegas
Oh
Academy.
yeah, I'm saying it like everybody knows.
And I've done some parapro work there as well. It's extremely rewarding.
It is,
and
yeah.
I think I really have learned a lot working with beginners and intermediate players, because you really have to break down what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And you have to figure out, like, well, what is the most efficient way to learn and to play?
Yeah.
So that's a really good way to just remind yourself. Now, how many instruments do you play totally?
I mean, it was funny, not to keep talking about last night, but guys were doubling in all weird ways. Like I said, there was a guy playing trumpet, flute, sax, vibes. Another keyboard player was playing trumpet. And I'm like, I just stick to the woodwinds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, flute, clarinet, saxes, and oboe, English horn. So that's my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I could comp some chords, but yeah, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll leave the piano to somebody else. Yeah.
Great. So what's next for you? You're just out there freelancing now.
Yeah, just doing a little freelancing. Since the show just ended less than a week ago, I'm going to go back to upstate New York for a couple of weeks and just relax and see the family. That's where I'm from.
Oh, great.
And then I'll be back and just, start hitting the pavement, as they say. And I'm open for anything. Just maybe start slowly building up the teaching studio again and do some more freelance stuff. I've upped my home studio because I have a couple friends in LA who sometimes will call me, can you record this for me like tonight?
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm like, I get done with the show and I wasn't happy with what I had, so I've upped my home studio. So we'll see where it goes. Been through this so many times, so I'm just letting it, take its course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And excuse me, this is something that is becoming more common and was kind of exacerbated by COVID.
Yeah.
Which was the idea that with technology the way it is, if you needed to record a jingle or something, and let's say you had a combo of 5 people, ideally you'd all be in the room, right?
Right.
But
right.
now you can all record your own separate parts on a home studio, and it can all be mixed.
Yeah.
And that's a big change. And I don't know, is that a different skill? How do you do that?
Oh man. Yeah, it is. It's kind of like learning another instrument in a way, like just getting used to technology and being able to, do that quickly. I just use a program called Logic and my MacBook, and just it's always like ready to go. And I've done a few where I've had to play multiple instruments, and so if I had to play 2 alto parts, I might switch the mouthpiece up or do something so it doesn't sound so homogenous, because to sound more like a section. Yeah. Because everybody sounds a little different, and I've done that a little bit. And one friend, he kind of will add me just on top of things because he's like pitching demos, kind of for film score stuff. And he's like, I just need a sax on this or a flute, and luckily where I live, I can just do that at night. And that got going a lot more during COVID. So yeah.
And so with your last gig, you did have to do some acting, right, as well?
Yeah, I had speaking parts, and it was ridiculous, and I was nervous as all get out when it started. Yeah. But I got used to it a little bit. So if there's any acting musician roles out there, no. It came another skill that, I probably did 1,000 times now. Wow. It was not 1,000, at least almost. So where I had and in this version of the show that just ended, I had a lot more little roles, little spots. Yeah. And the director we had, just Allegra Libertoni, she was great at getting that out of me. I had no faith in myself, and she said, you could do this, and it went okay. So yeah, and it's not typical acting because there's a lot of interaction with the audience. Yeah, it's a lot of it's almost entirely that with the other actors, right? Right. It's like a Don Rickles type show where it's all about interacting. Yes. And improvising. Yes. With the audience. Yep. So that must have been a challenge. It was, yeah. And some nights people would yell stuff, and I'm trying to say my lines, and just being around really great comedians all the time, I just kind of try to follow what they did. Yeah. And just take your time with the line. That was it. Just take your time. And a lot of times an act would end and I would just have to give enough time for them to reset the stage or whatever. And so like if I burn through the lines, they might not be ready.
Okay.
So they're always like, just take your time, milk it. So
interesting.
yeah, so I had to really stretch my little parts.
Yeah.
So
and this idea of actor musicians is becoming really its own subgenre. I mean, we have shows like the first really big one was Cabaret.
Yes.
The restaging of Cabaret, with like the actors being the band.
Yeah.
And then we've got Hadestown. We've got musicians that are actor musicians. Yep. We have this happening more and more.
Yeah. Bandstand that was written by the guys from here.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. So I'm open to it now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say my acting is near my musical ability, but I at least know I can delve in, I'm a little bit more comfortable doing that.
And you can put it on the resume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So, are you still studying new instruments, or where are you with your career?
No, just still, studying reed making for oboe. And right now I'm still just, the one instrument I'm really studying is oboe still. You can always work on reed making and all of that. It's been nice living here in Vegas and being on some long running shows to be able to, like, for a while there I was studying with Brandon Fields and working on saxophone still. And then, oh my God, my Marina Stern did some clarinet lessons with her because I was on Showstoppers at the Wynn that had some pretty heavy clarinet. And I was reed 2, but I'd jump over and play reed 1 and had some pretty gnarly clarinet parts that pushed me to my limits. And so kind of like whatever gig I'm on, I might take something that'll help me with that.
Yeah.
And oboe has always been a passion. And I play in the CSN, College of Southern Nevada Orchestra, every Monday. It's kind of a community group, but it gets the oboe in my face, which there's not a lot of opportunities for someone like me to do as a doubler,
Yeah.
Because I'm not getting called for the solo straight oboe gigs, but doubling, yeah. And that just keeps it's really helped so much to be able to do that. So I would say that's what I still work on the most.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably spend your lifetime learning how to make an oboe reed.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, it's and when you're starting out learning instruments and people are like, "Oh, I love the oboe," and you're like, "Well, you understand that like you're going to spend half your life shaving cane."
Yes.
And you're going to be surrounded by piles of cane shavings, much like a hamster in a cage.
That's right. Yeah.
You're just going to spend your life doing
it's already at the end of the night. I would, after shows, sometimes I'll go home and play and work on them, and you get a little taste of bourbon or something and scrape the reeds. And,
it's like, okay.
Let's go.
Yeah. And I always remember flying with oboists, because like they always have like shaving, like scrapers, and they have knives, and it's like, how do you get that through TSA? But
you have to check that stuff. But when I was at New Jersey City University, the head of the woodwind department, Ed Jaffe, I was taking just a woodwind methods class, and with Dan Willis, who's an amazing woodwind doubler in New York and sax player, one of my idols. Ed Jaffe said, "Larry, you're gonna play oboe. I heard you have an affinity for it." I'm like, "Yeah, I like it." So I didn't think it would, I'd still be doing it 20 years later.
Yeah.
And it always hasn't been on gigs, but I actually did play it on Opium for like about 2 months.
Oh, wow.
There was a backup act where I was able to work in oboe.
Really?
Yep. So
what would the oboe track be for that?
It was I think it was kind of like a pretty moment, and then it was just more, I played oboe to kind of set the mood, kind of like a more tranquil thing, and then picked up the sax.
Yeah.
But we worked it in the show.
That's great. So versatility is really important in the woodwind players' life.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Like I said, back to Ed Jaffe, he has a woodwind series where he's been interviewing great woodwind artists all the time. If you just watch any of his things on YouTube, they're great and really insightful for all that stuff. And just how, especially in New York as a working player, not in New York, but to get out in the touring world and to get in the show world, it really helps Even though the first gig I had was just alto sax, which is ringling.
Yeah.
I still had my flute and clarinet out there, and it's like I didn't want it to get rust on those things because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And being kind of a lifelong learner, I think, is also important.
Totally, 1000%. Doesn't stop.
Yeah, it never does stop. And we've had a couple oboists on the show, and it's been great. And it's definitely a passion. You definitely have to love it.
Yeah. It's nice for me to put on that hat to kind of go and play classical music when I play with the community college orchestra, because so much of the time I'm not, playing crazy shows or jazz or rock, or last night with Father John Misty, very indie and trippy. And it's just, I like doing it all. And I think that's why woodwinds appeal to me.
Yeah.
I love playing jazz, but I also like playing classical. And I had a great classical sax teacher growing up. And not that there's a ton of gigs for classical sax, but that mindset I still love. I love getting into it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's not a lot. There's some soloists. There's some sax quartets that do pretty well.
Yeah.
But that's again a very
very small niche. Yeah.
So you are one of the people that apparently watches the podcast, which I'm very excited
about. So I watch it or I'll listen to it as I'm doing things. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Is there anything that you found valuable so far, or is it
the biggest thing that, and I've explained it to people, is your formula for taking a gig? Yeah. And people are like, wait, what? One through, I try to explain to them, but I said, just kind of break it down how you did. And it made so much sense. And even the gig I did last night, where it was kind of a high profile person. I'm kind of a fan of his band. That was on the high for always wanting to do it, like a 3. Yeah. The pay was probably a 2. And then I looked, they were playing a big venue that sold out, probably 3,000 people. So, they're making money. So I just look at it like that now. Somebody called me to do a charity, obviously for Ukraine, and I'm definitely down to support it. But I just asked, well, okay, what do you need? What are you interested in? So is everybody giving their time? Is everybody donating their products? I just need to know that. And we'll get back to you. So I think that's a no. So but I'm like, I will do it, but they want to just exploit the musicians, but the bartender's not bringing in their boot. Like you said, I said, I want to think about that now. If it is a true charity, I will gladly donate some time, but I think it might not have been. You made me think about that in a more analytical way, where sometimes, I'm not doing anything that night and I want to play. Right. But
bringing a critical eye to it.
A very critical eye. And when I've explained it to other musicians, they're like, that scale is great. Your little formula or something close to that. They're like, yeah. So.
Yeah. I need to just put it, I need to create a widget out of it and then sell it or something, like Ron Popeil used to
exactly
with the Pocket Fisherman, because it really is my Pocket Fisherman.
Okay, yeah, totally, yeah.
So, and that episode is called, I can't remember the title of it, but I called my formula the Gigomatic.
Gigomatic, yep.
And you can look for that in past episodes if you haven't seen it yet.
Right.
And that's I think a really important thing is to again say I got called for a gig. It happens, maybe twice a year.
Right.
But I love playing, and I'm still, keeping my chops up.
Yeah.
And, I kind of went through the same thing where I'm like, well, this sounds like a great gig, but I have to just make sure that it's respecting the musicians, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it involved a broadcast, and so I was like, okay, well, this is something I really need to dig into, because when we're captured either audio or audio visually, and it's going to go on TV or it's going to go on streaming or whatever, we need to make sure that we're taken care of and we're treated with respect. And so I had to do some digging to find out, this is like a union job. So I was happy to do it, and it's been a real joy to play. And so but we often don't go through that math in our head.
Yeah.
And I remember the example I use of this is a drummer who worked with Michael Jackson for his whole career.
Okay.
And often folks will be paid a lot of money to tour with people like Father John Misty,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
His core band, and they'll be like, "Wow, this is really good bread,"
Mm-hmm.
and there's no union contract in place.
Right.
And so the problem with that is that if there is a capture, you're not guaranteed any residual income from that.
Right.
So this was years ago, and it was right after Michael Jackson had passed away. And there was a film called This Is It.
Yep.
And
Seen it.
Hugely popular film, and just acres and acres of footage from his tours.
Yeah.
And so a musician called me up and was like, "Hey, I'm the drummer for Michael Jackson, and I'm all over this movie, and the band is all over this movie, and when are we going to get our bread?" Right. And so I did some digging and found out that there was no touring contract. And again, probably upfront money was great for these guys.
Right.
But if you're not, unfortunately, the only protection you have in that case is a union contract usually.
Right.
And because if it's not a union job, what you're probably going to sign is a release saying that you are agreeing that any media that's captured for you will be used without any further compensation. Right. There's going to be that rider in your personal service contract. So, I had to tell this guy, I'm really sorry, but unless the family wants to give you some bread, like there's not much I can do for you.
Right.
There's no contract to enforce for this work. So that's just something that I think should be part of every musician's education, is just like knowing, okay, if this is a job that's a freelance job that is not covered, or if it's covered, these are my risks.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to lend my work and my talent to this, knowing that I could be exploited, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so just having that kind of conversation in your head, I think, is really empowering. And a lot of times it's not taught in college.
Right.
So in our last few minutes, do you have any advice you would give to up and coming musicians who might be graduating, sax players or wind players?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. For me, it was just, I was taking anything where I could, at that time, playing in local high school musicals, everything. I did a non-union tour to get my feet wet in the doubling area, just what I had to do at the time, because it's hard to get up there until you have the experience and skills. And to educate yourself on all this stuff that we talk about, or you talk about, because it protects both sides. That's what I felt like with Ringling. The contract protected us and them. Like they were getting a service, we were supplying it.
Yeah.
And the gig I was just on was non-union, but I tried to make it that way. But I felt Spiegelworld did treat me fairly, and compensation was fair. The gig was, more than fair. They were generous in many ways. So I kept that in check. I remember when I got the gig, I called the union and said, like, what do you think of these numbers? What do you think of this? And they were like, yeah. So, not to be afraid as you're coming up. If you have questions, just to call your local union. If you have questions about gigs or what it should pay or what I should be compensated, because we are so hungry to play when we're young.
Yeah,
that it's good to keep it in balance. And that's why I feel like your gigometer is great. Even when you're young, obviously when you're young, just get out there and do as much as you can. But at some point, that kind of transfers, like once you have a career established, you're just kind of, you don't want to be taken advantage of, but also it's good peace of mind. And like I said, I've done union things, the CIrcus, and I've done Color Purple with Troika was union, and I've done non, but the non, as I've gotten older, I kind of just go in really trying to analyze more of it than I did before. So yeah.
And I think we would all prefer that everything is union. And we're not there yet, right, in terms of our density and in terms of having the power to do that. But that's, I think, ultimately where we want to be. But there is a balance between, like, you know, you can't not show up, right? Like the John Miller kind of maxim of, you got to be out there. People have to know you.
Yes.
And so his thing was, if the phone rings, I'm open for it.
Yeah.
But I think we also have to bring that critical eye of, like, well, making sure this is going to be
exactly
something that really is going to benefit you as well. As someone else.
Yeah. Like, I think you were talking about, was it Desert Winds?
Yeah.
Great establishment kind of nonprofit group. And that's something like that I would do. But if you have to know what it is.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask. And, because I've gotten some offers for things. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You know, like, and it's not even the playing. It might be like where it is, or the time, or the length, or, you know, I had somebody recently call me to put together, oh my God, it's I'll make this quick. The band in New York City, the Barry sax player and the drums, and oh my God, I forget the name, Zoo something. They're great. They're playing this stuff. They've gotten big. This sax player who dances and everything. They wanted that for a wedding. And I'm like, well, A, I don't have a band that does that. B, it's really specific. And I'm going to have to spend a lot of time writing it out or working out. And then we have to memorize it to march around. I'm like, the number I'm going to have to give you is astronomical. And I said, maybe you should just try calling them. So anyway, and that didn't work out. But anyways.
No, and you mentioned Desert Winds, and that's a group that I played with, and I hope to play with them again this year. If the scheduling works out. Yeah. It's a really great group. It's truly a community group. They have, just a tiny, tiny budget, and I would love to see them be a professional organization.
Right.
And so, and I think they have the artistic chops to do that, but it's about building up the the resources behind it,
right?
So we can truly become a professional group. But again, like, if somebody said, hey, there's a free opportunity to play at MGM Arena, I'd be like, no, if they're charging tickets or whatever. So we just have to be really careful, I think, in our own minds. And I'm glad you found my gig.
Because I feel like, for me, playing the community college orchestra and oboe, that's good for me, because I'm not going to get that call necessarily, and it helps me raise that level of my skills. And also, they're not, the concerts are like practically free. They're not making a big. It's a community college, not making a profit off it. So
exactly.
Yeah. But and I mean, the John Miller talk was great. He came to Jersey City and spoke, and I still remember things he said then.
Yeah.
Like how we kind of are in the service industry, and I just had coffee with a friend of mine who's playing sax with Usher a couple days ago, and he said, guys are already starting to complain, but he's like, we are here for him. Like, if he needs to change the show, we need to do that. We still have to remember, like, sometimes we get hired, we are to help the artist. Like, so much of the time we just, I don't know. They always say, give a musician a gig, and that's what how do you get what is this?
It's like, how do you get a musician to complain? Right?
Yeah, give him a gig. So
and I think that's a really key thing, because I believe that it's actually in balance, right? So there are certain players who are really the top players,
right?
The top of the field. I think that they also have to be good colleagues.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that people would rather have the second best player who's a good colleague, than the first player who's a crazy diva.
Yeah, 1,000%.
And that's something that people don't realize. And again, you get on these gigs, like, you're like, oh, I'm playing with Usher, and I whatever. But it's not about you at the end of the day. It's about the music. Yeah,
and I feel like my Ringling experience set me up for. And you popping out, Don Parker was a big influence in the union, like, just making sure it's fair. So, like, there's some things Don's like, we're not going to go after that.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? I was young. Why not? And it's like, well, no, we got to pick our battles and try to Ringling was always fair with us, and we had a good relationship with the union in Ringling. So, yeah, it gave me a good education young on like what to keep an eye on, and other gigs where I'm like, well, that's cool because they're doing this. Or like I said, when I was on a non-union gig, there was many benefits I was getting that I've never gotten on union gigs. Like always getting free dinner, at the show, different things where I'm like, okay, they're doing these things that are positive. If this changes, maybe I'll, pull my inner Don Parker out and go after them. Yeah. Not that Don was like that. Don, if you're watching, love you, man, miss you.
Yeah.
So,
and at one time this was what blew my mind. There was 3 circuses out.
Yeah.
And then within like 5 years, there's no circuses.
No, but they're coming back at the end of this year.
That's what they say.
Next year. Yeah.
And so, I don't know what that means as far as the music.
Yeah.
Do they have an obligation to honor our contract or not that we had in place? That's a really good legal question. But,
yeah.
Do you know any musicians who have been called about
No,
that?
don't know anything.
Yeah.
I do know someone from Opium who auditioned and sat down and talked to Kenneth Feld, the producer owner. And, he just said they're just trying to create something new, reinvent it. So,
yeah.
And nothing, I've heard anything about musicians, but he could have cut the band years ago.
Yeah.
That's what everybody was always afraid of. Oh, we'll cut the band from 9 to 6. And in the big shows, they had a 6-piece band in the One Ring show.
Yeah.
The Gold Show, but they were playing much smaller venues, and that was a whole different thing. But
yeah.
I would hope there'd be something, because I feel like Kenneth Feld really did enjoy having that live band element, especially for the circus.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons why you want a live band.
Yeah.
And I think what people don't understand is why music was integrated so deeply into the circus. A lot of it has to do with timing.
Yes.
So the horse act is supposed to start, and the horse is back there, doing his business or whatever. And there's all of a sudden 45 seconds that you've got to fill.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that with a recording.
Yeah. I mean, there's all this technology now today with Ableton and looping and tracks that is pretty amazing. Yeah. But there was still that live element, I think, that gave it the energy that the show really thrived on. And I really hope that they bring it back with a band. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see where that lands, because they kind of dismantled the entire infrastructure of the circus.
Yep.
They sold off all the train cars.
Yep. Yes,
so they don't have trains anymore.
Right.
I guess they could maybe buy Amtrak trains.
Yeah, I think they'll probably bus and truck this one,
and
make it more, because they have all the Disney Live and Disney on Ice. So they have a lot of shows still out there, Feld Entertainment. So I think they'll use that infrastructure, that model. And without the animals, it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah.
And that's what they're saying it's going to be. I mean, I think maybe horses. I don't know. I've just heard none of the exotics. So
yeah.
Or maybe all animalists. I'm not completely sure on that, but I would love to go. Hey, if you need anybody.
Yeah. I
it'd
never.
Be fun.
Yeah, I never understood how the circus made a dime, frankly.
Yeah.
Because there was hundreds of people.
Yeah.
They're on a train. The elephants alone, I think someone told me, cost $70,000 a year just to feed an elephant and make sure that they.
That's probably about right.
And so I never. And so I would go see the circus, and the marketing was a little sketchy, and so the arena would sometimes be half full, and you're like, how are they making any money?
I think because we played a lot of shows, even if the arena's half full.
That's true. You did tons of shows.
At least 10 a week and more.
Yeah.
Every Saturday was 3 shows, and
That's
they were
amazing.
Even if they were half full. These are arenas that are 20,000 seats.
Right.
So I think they did all right.
Yeah.
Overall, we played a lot of shows, and any gig after the circus is a cakewalk, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Broadway 8 shows, the Vegas standard's 10 90-minute shows a week, but those are still, do 1 at 8 and 10, and you're out of,
Yeah.
The circus would be 2.5 hours
2.5
playing
hours,
3 times.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm always the old guy now in the room. You don't know what it was like at the circus.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
The only thing that comes close to that is the Christmas Spectacular in New York.
Totally, yeah.
But that's a very small season, right? It's
Right.
maybe 2 or 3
and they
months.
can play 6 shows a day.
It's crazy, yeah. And I think are they 90 minutes? They must only be 90 minutes.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I think there might even be less.
Yeah,
but they just turn them out and
9 a.m. 11:30.
Yeah,
to, whatever it is.
And I remember talking. He's passed away, but he was a wonderful, amazing sax player, woodwind artist, Jerry Nywood.
Mhm.
He played it for years, and he would say "E pluribus unum," one of many. Like he would play, I think, almost every show.
Yeah.
That run, and then he said he would sleep for 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
crazy.
And yeah. Anyway.
Well, any other parting words you want to leave our listeners?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Just yeah. I mean, I think getting involved with the union is great, and being just aware. And people don't realize the resource you have with it.
Yeah.
From legal to any questions to. I had a friend. Something happened a few years ago here where he went and something happened on a gig, and he went to the union, and he was paid like almost a year's salary because he was unrightfully fired.
Yeah.
Like things like that. Just people forget about the benefits of it. Everybody just thinks, well, what has it done for me, or how to get me a gig? I'm like, well, it's not that, but it's good to think about it when you're taking jobs. And like I said, it's a great resource to have.
Yeah, and we get that. I do a lot of trainings around that,
Yeah.
and we talk about that question. And I think we want to encourage people to, first of all, see any movement that they're a part of as a movement.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so if you're somebody who goes through, let's say, scouting, right?
Yeah.
There are people that have transformative experiences through scouting, and they identify as scouts their whole life, and they give back to the organization. And it's an analogy that makes sense because we want people to have the same identity with their union. Right?
Yeah.
Like that if you're a member of a union, that you see the union as yourself, and you see it as the source of your power, right? And your positivity in your career. So getting to that point is it's different in our industry in that we have so much work that is part-time.
Yes.
Or in your case, like at Opium, you were one person.
Right.
So a little different than, trying to organize a auto plant or a hospital.
Or even a symphony orchestra.
Or even a symphony orchestra,
with all the members.
Which is where we have a lot of density because there's regular employment there.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think moving to that feeling that the union is me. It's not, and it's me and you. It's not another agency. Is something that I work a lot with folks on, and it's a constant struggle to get there. But and that gets people out of the mindset of like, what are you doing for me? Because it's like, well, I'm the union, right?
Right. And I remember in New York going to the 802 and rehearsing, and some places have, like it'd be great if we had something like that here eventually. But we are the union. It's not someone else,
Right.
Even, I don't know, when my show was changing, I'm like, we are the show, like we,
right.
The producer and everything put it out there, but we are it. And I think that's important. I remember going back to Ed Jaffe in school, bringing that up, saying, it has all these other things that help us. And I had a friend going to sub in a show, and he wasn't in the union. He's like, "You better run down there and join. You can't sub a show." But we didn't know. We were so young. We just were green and briefly, I went to Indiana and had a little. I hurt my jaw, and then took a year off and transferred, and it was the best thing that happened to me because all my teachers in New Jersey were like working players, and they gave me such an education in that. Like being cool, showing up on time. When John Miller came, it's a service. Just prep me so well,
right,
for what I need to know, which I didn't get at Indiana. It was kind of just a lot of amazing players there, but I got the real world experience. And Ed was the main leader in that and just really pounded it home.
Yeah.
And it's, even though I haven't taken a conventional route,
Yeah.
I mean, the other way I would have just stayed in New York and tried to sub and play Broadway, which would have been great. But there was always some adventurous spirit in me. I wanted to tour. I spent 2 years in Singapore. Like, I had a blast in an untypical way, but, Ed and Walt Weiskopf, Alan Wan, all these, Dan Willis, these guys just helped, they were people I looked up to and just kind of were great guides in how to do all this stuff and navigate it. And how can I make a living doing this?
Yeah.
So.
And where were you at IU or where were you?
IU, yep.
Okay.
Wilmington, yeah.
Yeah.
2 years, yep.
Okay. Huge music school.
Great. I mean, and my friend who plays with Usher, we met there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But I felt like, we are in the Midwest. We were in the Midwest and, some really great pedagogues, but the guys in New Jersey City University really knew the career side.
Yeah, because you're not going to get freelance in Bloomington.
No. Maybe the Four Tops come through.
Yeah.
Once in a while, or the Temptations. These guys were doing everything, getting called, going. I mean, we had in our music business class, Ed had people from all over the gamut come in, contractors, copyists. John Miller came to our class. Gosh, I'm trying to think. Yeah, guys who are playing on Broadway, and he would bring us to the pits. Dan Willis let me sit in the pit, and it was great just seeing how small it was. Yeah. And then you got to nail your stuff, but also be cool and relaxed. And anyways, it was, it was such an invaluable thing that I still reference all that stuff now.
Yeah.
So
that's great. And I think, there is on Broadway, especially when you think about what they've, had to fight for over the years.
I was there when the strike happened too, going to school in
2003.
Yeah,
right?
Being in big band and my teachers coming in and nobody had jobs for a few weeks, and luckily, and I saw then that when the stagehand, everybody went on strike, and that's when
actors and the stagehands.
Actors and stagehands was really powerful,
and the management of the Broadway producers had kind of tactically kind of a big misstep in that they kind of cavalierly said to the press, in this negotiation, which was really about preserving live music and theater.
Yeah.
And, if you say to an arranger, here's South Pacific, it was originally written for 25 people, make it for 3. Somebody out there's going to do it, right? And so it was really about trying to preserve the integrity through the minimum process, which is that says in these Broadway theaters, we're going to hire this many people. And unless there's some special situation, which the contract allows people to apply for. And that was what was at stake. And the producers kind of cavalierly said to the press, well, we could replace everybody with technology if we had to. And what that allowed the musicians to do was to say to the cab driver, who may not understand the intricacies of this negotiation, do you want to pay $150 or $200 for a Broadway ticket and hear a recording in the pit, right? And most people understood that issue. They're like, oh no, that's a ripoff, right?
Yeah.
So when it became like that kind of framing, it was really a fight that everybody in the public really got behind the musicians on. Yeah,
I mean, and out here, there's a couple Cirque du Soleil shows that, one has no musicians. And to me, I said, it feels like a dance recital. Yeah. Put the track on and go. Where I refuse to go see this show. And because coming from the circus tradition, it adds so much to the show, the live entertainment. I can go listen to the Beatles at home and put on headphones and hear it amazingly. Do I need to do that while seeing someone do a flip?
Right.
I mean, I get it's a great show and all that, but to me personally, the live element of a band following a performer, following the tricks, is more valuable to me than, I can listen to. I can't go see a circus at home. and
Right.
see that. Like I could, but like I can put on the Beatles and listen to
Right.
amazing, and hide everything amazing at home. And yeah, so I guess the show I'm talking about is Beatles Love. So anyways,
Yeah.
but it's just my personal opinion. And I've worked so much in the circus. So
yeah. And again, it's about timing. You want to be
yeah.
able to
Yeah. And
react.
and it's a good show, but I always feel like when there's tracks, it just feels like a dance recital. Just put it on. Like we need that live element, especially Broadway, Cirque du Soleil has many great shows that have amazing musicians. So there's just been a couple where they don't. So
yeah. And I think what experiences like the New York strike do for people, like your teachers, for example, is that they give them experience of like, without banding together, the producers would replace all of us, right? Like so they have an experience of being a union and seeing how they collectively have a lot of power. And so that's why when your teacher says, wait, who was subbing for you? And they're not a member of the union.
Right.
Like, no, that's not going to happen. And so I think that is something that's sometimes missing in the education piece. Yeah. And, it's not that, I mean, it's just a culture, right? Like in New York City, when I was coming up,
it's a big culture there.
I had no experience of local 802.
Okay.
None whatsoever. All I knew is that if I wanted to sub on Broadway, that I had to join. Right. Like I learned later, but it was part of the culture. That and again, it comes from that struggle and having that experience of winning together and knowing that like everything that we do that isn't up to that standard is going to undermine it.
Right. At one point, I remember Don saying early on, Don Parker's, the contract's what binds us. They could still fire us with the contract, but like at least while we're doing the gig, fair treatment. Like if a band member gets a mohawk, you
the
can't.
Mohawk story.
You can't.
Such a great.
You
story.
Can't tell them not to play because we have a contract that says we can wear what we want, and it's a circus.
Yes.
And the main clown did it. It's so silly and crazy, but it was people in different spots of power thinking they could run the show, but our other people had a clause that they had to be clean shaven.
Mm-hmm.
We did not. And it's funny because it was all there, and it really showed me like it's agreement like for both of us to help protect both of us, both sides. But like you said, people are so afraid sometimes to unionize, but they could still fire you without it
anyway, right?
Yeah, like we're just trying to get better treatment, or at least keep it fair, keep it up to standards, And out here, it's a different mentality than New York, I'll say.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we can work together to change that a little bit out here. But and that's one thing that I hear a lot from people, like, oh, well, I'm sure that there's some issues over here, but everybody's scared. It's like, well, do you not think that the people at Amazon aren't scared of being fired? And they organized, on Staten Island. That's a great story. The Starbucks employees. I mean, every worker is afraid, right? So what we do in organizing is we have a process where we try to get people over those fears. Right. And one of the things that we say is like, can't they do that now, right? Like, but I wanted to the story that you referenced is one of my favorite, and I'm going to give you my take on it. So,
okay, all right.
So I was actually in Las Vegas at a convention. We used to have our conventions at the old Riviera, which is now
blown up.
Yeah. There's a ginormous convention center extension now built there.
Right.
And so I'm in the Riviera, and I loved the carpet in the Riviera. It was some of the ugliest carpet in the world. And when they were closing, I tried to get some of my friends out here to buy me.
Oh, wow. Carpet. That's funny.
Could never get my hands on it.
The Riv was something.
It was really something.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm there, and Don had called me, and I was super busy because it was the convention. Yeah. And he started going on he started asking me specific questions about the appearance clause in the contract. And I'm like, okay, where is this coming from? And so he starts going into it a little bit. And I'm just like so busy. I'm just like, well, Don, can you just do me a favor and just put it all in an email? Because I'm just out here. It's 100 degrees and I can't really process all this. I
Right.
don't have the contract in front of me.
Yeah.
And so I got back to New York City and, check my email, and I get this email from Don, who was the union steward on.
Yeah.
Was that the blue or the red?
That was the blue. And you were always, your name was famous because it was whenever something was going wrong. I'm calling Manly. That was the thing. I'm calling Manly. And then Don would be like, all right, let's hold on before we call Manly. Let me, let's work this out. It was always, I'm calling Manly.
So that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
And
before I even knew you, it was calling Manly.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
That's great. And I'm like, okay, Don had something he was referencing, and I get back to New York and I get this email, and the first sentence of the email is, well, this whole thing started when the clowns decided to give Joel a mohawk.
It was Joel. Yep.
And I couldn't read anymore because I was literally on the floor of my office laughing.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this has got to be the best email I've ever received. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't even know what's going on here. But we did do some investigating, and there was some shenanigans happening with a mohawk. But again, nothing happened. We were able to. Yeah,
I mean, so Joel, it was his last week, I think. And we were all buddies with the clowns, and they wanted to give him a mohawk. And like the main famous clown, this guy David Leary, actually helped do it, and they spiked it up, and he went out, and we had some curmudgeons, I'd say, in management. I mean, it was silly.
Yeah.
There was clowns with mohawks,
right.
And they said, "Oh, you can't do that." They were thinking we had that clause in our contract, and Joel actually said, "I'll buzz it, I'll shave it, I'll do whatever you want."
Yeah.
But they told him he couldn't perform, and so he didn't perform, but he still got paid for it because there was nothing in there.
Yeah.
And he actually, I was there. He was like, "I'll do what you want," and they just went off, and it got heated, and they told him to leave. And I mean, I was there for it all, and it was just silly because it didn't need to happen. It was just kind of a fun, like, it's your last week. It was like kind of a and it just, some party poopers out there weren't. But the contract didn't have a clause, and what was good, other contracts did out there with like I said, the stagehands, and that's where the contract was. Them having one and us having one was clear. Like, oh yeah, they have to be clean cut. There's nothing, and I don't think we were like, it's not like we're going to do it forever or whatever. It was just kind of a fun last week thing. Yeah. And he like, I remember seeing him comb it down. I'll do whatever you want. And they just weren't having it. The people on the local unit. And I don't know if it was personal reasons or what, but it was pretty funny. So, it's a legendary story, I guess. So yeah.
So don't let the clowns cut your hair.
Don't let the clowns cut your hair. That's a key.
If there's one piece of career advice that we can give you, it's don't let the clowns cut your hair.
Exactly. There we go. We can end on that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Bill, today.
Yeah, it was a blast.
And you're like an incredibly varied performer. You're a lifelong learner, and you're out there showing up and using the Gig-O-Matic to find out if you're getting it.
That's right.
So
you can make an app for that.
We need an app for it.
You need an app for it.
I don't have any development friends, but we're going to work on that.
We'll work on that.
Or T-shirt at least.
Yeah. The next convention.
Some Gig-O-Matic swag. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to have you, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the bandstand or elsewhere in the future.
All right, sounds good, Mike.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.